I wonder if you could speak to what happened as we came on the air today, and that is that there was an injunction, and this is again one of these nationwide injunctions on this birthright citizenship order from the president. Can you speak to how quickly that injunction both spoke to the problem and also how it's only a 7-day injunction? So maybe that's suggesting a Supreme Court ruling on this?
Well, cases have to be pleaded correctly, especially back in, our history. You read Dickens, Bleak House, that sort of thing. It was very important how cases were pleaded. And now in modern practice and in federal practice, Mark, we've tried to make pleading easier so that the facts and the law can get before the court. And it's not just all a matter of whether the lawyers have artfully pleaded the case or not. And that may be all that was wrong with the case that recently reached the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm not faulting the lawyers. They presented the case to the judge. They thought that would be the way to do it with a nationwide injunction. The Supreme Court just slapped the district judge down in that case. But it might have been just how the lawyers presented the case. Maybe this is the key that will open the legal ruling that birthright citizenship is in the Constitution. It's inviolate. It can't be changed without a constitutional amendment, because maybe the cure was just to do this. Was to present in New Hampshire, could have been any other federal court, a request for a not a nationwide injunction, but a class action where the class was all the babies born in America. And if the class is all the babies born in America and they're all before that federal court, albeit in New Hampshire, it could have been California, like the case, but that may be the trick that opens the correct ruling. And yes, you're right, that may go, excuse me, to the U.S. Supreme Court promptly. When this case gets on the merits to the U.S. Supreme Court, I put all my Katz predictions on the table, Mark, right here on the table. Birthright citizenship is constitutional. It can't be changed. It's right there. The 14th Amendment, passed right after the Civil War, says anyone born in the United States. It has a tiny exception, which is for diplomats, kids born in the United States from other countries, has no relevance to any of this. There's a Supreme Court precedent decided about 100 years ago that involved a person born of Chinese parents who were not lawfully in the United States. But the mere fact that he was here, born, it didn't make any difference whether his parents were lawful residents or not. That's obviously precedent for what's going on right now. All these babies born in the United States are going to be citizens. It's guaranteed by the Constitution. And the 7 days, Mark, is just that the administration will no doubt want to appeal this. That'll be to the First Circuit up there in New England. I don't believe that they're going to overturn the judge within 7 days, and then they'll have to run to the U.S. Supreme Court, the administration, and we may have a ruling quite promptly. Maybe this was the key, the pleading key that opens the door to the ruling on the Constitution.
Yeah, you've been consistent on this, saying that you feel as though this will be...
I can read.
Yeah, you're saying it's in clear language in the Constitution. So the big ruling about the Supreme Court clearing the way for these mass firings, I think that is something that maybe you wouldn't have predicted in such an overwhelming way. I think there was only, of the liberal judges, only one dissented. In other words, the Supreme Court has said, hey, you, Donald Trump, you can legally proceed with the restructuring of government, which involves firing thousands of workers.
Well, I wasn't actually asked on this particular one, as I recall. And now now that I see what the U.S. Supreme Court has done, we predict.
No, I wasn't suggesting it was a Katz official prediction, but I just thought you might be surprised.
Imitators, or not Nostradamus imitators, we prognosticators, we're very sensitive about these things. Mark, the case is really fascinating, and the news is bad. The news is bad because the district judge had said that she thought that I think it's a she. Anyway, the district judge said that it looked like the plaintiffs would win on the merits. And that's what the Ninth Circuit out here on the West Coast said. Only 2-1, but that's what they said. Now the U.S. Supreme Court just said, at least the 6 of them, that they believe that the Trump will win on the merits. The merits of this case is how much the executive branch, Mark, can restructure the federal bureaucracy without Congress weighing in. I believe that what the district judge did and what the Ninth Circuit affirmed and that has now been overruled, was correct. I believe that when Congress sets up these huge agencies and structures them and funds them, that there is an expectation that they cannot be massively undone by the executive because Congress sets up and spends the money. So I just think that they're way wrong on this, but I think they're wrong on other things, and they're the U.S. Supreme Court. At the end, it's not because they're right. It's because there are 5 of them. That's
Wow,
really all it is.
That's a great line. I don't know if that is taken from some text, but it's a great way to put it, particularly these days. But
a lot of it's derivative, Mark. A lot of it's derivative. But if you steal from one person, it's plagiarism. If you steal from many, it's good research.
I love the line. It's not because it's right. It's because there are 5 of them. So let me just speak though to the minority, and then I'll move on. We have a lot to get to. But the minority opinions, because you expect that the liberal justices might line up against the executive's ability to do what you're talking about, which is to dismantle and get rid of a bunch of the staffers of these federal agencies. That the liberal justices, traditionally thought of as liberal justices, right? That they sided with the conservatives except for one.
Well, let's say you're dealing with the State Department, and the State Department's going to have apparently 18 or 1,900 people affected by this decision. Okay. It's so, where do you draw the line? It may be that some small office can have half of its staff fired because that's a presidential priority. But it seems like an entire office couldn't be disbanded. If the entire office is set up by the Congress, the idea that you can completely emasculate that office, that you can remove a whole bunch of people. So 5 or 10 or reassignments, there should be something. Obviously, the president doesn't have to get Congress's approval when they get rid of 2 or 3 people. But where is the line? And I thought that the line was not where the U.S. Supreme Court seems to have drawn it by saying that they believe that the president will win on the merits. Now, you might wonder, how do they know that without having a trial? But they're so smart. They have all these law clerks, the justices do, and they take a look at it. They take a look at it just right now on this record based on the pleadings, and they say that they think that the president is going to win on this, that he can largely restructure. Now, here's the reason that the 2 of the usual 3 didn't join Jackson. Because the executive order that does this, Mark, it says that it has to all be done according to law. And so since it says according to law, like Sotomayor says, it'll go back to the same judge who decided it in the first place. And that judge will make sure everything is done according to law. But it's a little bit of, whistling by the graveyard because, again, the merits, the 6 of them said, are that the president, they think, will win on the merits. Now, they can decide right now that they think that the administration will win on the merits. And then once the record is more developed, once the U.S. Supreme Court actually sees it, let's say 6 or 8 months from now, they may decide that on the overall question, they don't win on the merits. Now, I'm not minimizing how important this is, Mark, because hundreds of thousands of people have already, the probationary employees were pretty much let go. And the reality is they're going to get other jobs. The probationary employees are probably never going to come back. The probationary employees, some of them were already supervisors. In the time of the probation period, a year or 2, they'd shown how much worth and value they had. They were going to be kept. They were actually supervisors by then, and they were knocked out as probationary. There are other people who just said, I can see the writing on the wall. They probably saw the writing on the wall from the time that Trump polled higher than Kamala Harris. But there's a lot of people who've been getting out of the administration because they've got other jobs. They're very desirable. They've gone to the state government to do similar functions they used to do for the federal government. So there's a couple of 100,000 people who've already left federal government service on account of this was brewing. But what's going to actually happen agency by agency, and this affects about 15 or 16 different federal agencies. And I'm jumping around a bit, but the effect of this, since the injunction was issued in May, was tremendous. If you're looking at it from the point of view of the administration, this original injunction didn't even allow them to plan, Mark, to reorganize these agencies. So the administration was totally on hold. And, if these orders had kept the administration on hold for 3.5 more years, that would have probably solved the whole problem from my point of view. And from the U.S. Supreme Court's point of view, the 6 of them, it was like, no, this is not staying on hold for a couple of years, because this judge had said that she was, I think it's she, the judge had said that it seems so likely that the Congress was not consulted properly and that Trump would lose, that all of the planning, all of the everything was stayed. So while the case got tried and litigated, that could have been a year, Mark, right? And for
Sure.
a year, Trump and his administration couldn't even put in their plans for these reorganizations at 15 or 16. And that's what got the 6 of them riled up enough to take this case on what they call the shadow docket. And they didn't just say we're sending it back for a new injunction. They said, and this is what's important, even in the terse little shadow docket ruling, Mark, they
Right.
said, we think that Trump will win this one on the merits. So last thing I want to say is that as you go through all of those 16 agencies or so that are affected by it, every single one, there may be civil service protections. So the first time they actually reorganize, they actually fire somebody, tell somebody they're going to be fired. And it may be that they can do it now within 30 days. The normal rule was within 60 days. But as soon as the person gets the termination notice, this is the guy who doesn't want to leave federal service and do some other job or take their early retirement. This is the guy who wants to stay. That guy has a union. That guy has civil service protections. That guy will come in and challenge the order, and agency by agency, challenge by challenge, all of that will happen. So this is why Sotomayor and Kagan said they can't scream that the theater's on fire every time it happens, which you sort of want to do. Say the theater's on fire every time these 6 are doing something on the Supreme Court. I think the 2 of them said, you know what? This one can be ameliorated because as you go through it, person by person, they'll have their own challenges, agency by agency. And Jackson said, this is an abomination. This is unbelievable. You guys are just rolling over for Trump. And that's what she said now a couple of times now, that this is not law. This is just you're eager. She said the 6 justices, you're eager to greenlight this president. That's where she got the rebuke about a week or 2 ago from Amy Coney Barrett. And obviously, Chief Justice Roberts, he's no fool. Chief Justice Roberts, you think, as well as knowing a lot of law, you wonder why the most important case of the term, probably last term, he gave it. He didn't keep it himself since he was in the majority, why he gave it to Barrett. And it seems like the reason was, I think, I'm speculating, that because Jackson is a young female Democratic appointed justice, he was going to have the young female Republican appointed justice, right? Duke it out with her, Duchess it out with her.
Is, by the way, ameliorate is a ding word. The question comes, though, just help me, when you look at this process that you just described, you're saying that the power that those individuals who are going to be dismissed or in line for dismissal or however they do it with a forced buyout, et cetera, they will challenge, it's understood, those dismissals in various courts around the country, and that will be allowed to play out? Are you saying that
Yes.
was, okay, I just want to be clear on that. So
Well,
they're saying
union.
the apparatus is there for the challenge is their point. They don't need to block the president's ability to restructure.
But it's important to understand what the district judge had done while the litigation was pending, and that could have gone on for, let's say, a year. A stay was in effect, which meant thousands and thousands of people couldn't be fired.
Sure.
Their agencies couldn't be restructured. Trump couldn't even put in plans. That was in violation of the order because, after all, Congress needed to be consulted, the district judge said, and Congress wasn't being consulted. Now, you might wonder, with a bunch that passed the big, beautiful bill, why isn't Congress being consulted? But this probably is something that couldn't go through what's called reconciliation, Mark. So it couldn't have been done by the barest majority. In the Senate, it would have been subject to the filibuster. There are not 60 senators who want to restructure any of these agencies. And the reason I said 15 or 16 agencies, Mark, is that there's some other agencies that were not covered by this order. And they're all of these rulings, basically, they've gone against Trump. People talking about 95%, Mark, of the cases were decided against Trump. That's the minutia of all of these. There was a ruling at, I think there was one at DOJ. Remember, there was another one at Treasury. So there have been all of these things where, like, the Treasury Union has sued, I think, successfully to block restructuring and transfers there. There's all of this stuff that's going on. And so that's what it certainly was. This was something that certainly got a lot of attention because there are thousands of people who are just saying, if the Supreme Court is ultimately going to rule against me, I'm getting a job with the state government. I'm going into the private sector. I'm
Sure.
getting out of the federal government. We're losing tremendous resources. And here's the last thing I want to say. I've been fighting the federal government for years. I'm the one who says if it's appropriate, that there was government malfeasance here. I'm fighting the IRS that they didn't follow the right procedures according to what the procedures are. But the federal employees are terrific, Mark. They do not sit there all day long, right, and twiddle their thumbs. I mean, they have all kinds you look at the IRS, let's take just normal IRS agent. What agency does Trump love to bash more than that? They keep their hours meticulously. I mean, more than at a law firm. They account for everything they do in an 8-hour day.
Well, most of them are making less money than they make in the private sector anyway. I mean, it's this is this picture, this cartoonish picture of public servants is really a disservice to the work they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to just ask you quickly, because I know our time is limited. There was
I have more time, Mark. I juggled my schedule a little bit.
Okay, thanks. The gun legislation is interesting to me. That there are various in the big beautiful bill legislation. There is legislation within the legislation that's associated with guns, and there was the National Firearms Act that had imposed a $200 tax on manufacturing and transfer of firearms, silencers, and short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns. I'm just reading that has long been upheld. So gun groups with the new administration in charge went right after it, and they now have rolled back a lot of that. And so the gun industry wants to bring this to court and make it permanent, the rollback and if you will, the tax on these things like silencers for weapons. They don't really want any impediments to gun ownership.
I don't know when the Republican Party became the party of gun silencers. I mean, the Republicans were conservative, law and order. Like I said, I was in the Reagan administration. We went after silencers. What is anybody legitimately doing with a silencer? You need to shoot a deer with a silencer? No, it's a crime. It's a gun that's used to commit crimes and to try to get away with it, so people won't hear that someone's just been murdered. So I don't get any of this. But the case that interested me more was the case about the click to cancel. Are we going to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the U.S. court has struck down a click to cancel rule that was supposed to make unsubscribing easier. So, when you want to unsubscribe to something, it would have kept businesses from forcing customers through the long process of canceling something. It would be that's why it's called a click to cancel rule. So the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit vacated the Federal Trade Commission's click to cancel rule that would have required companies to allow consumers to cancel subscriptions using the same method they used to sign up. After finding the commission that the commission behind it failed to follow required procedures under the FTC Act during the rule-making process. They're seeing a legal problem with the way the rule was made.
Well, this was really something that hits home. That a lot of this stuff seems kind of lofty if you're not a federal employee, if you don't see how your rights are in particular being impinged. A lot of what we talk about is really fascinating, but you may think, how does this really affect me? This one really affects you. It actually affects sort of my life. One of the reasons that I don't go on more things is I figure what a huge hassle it'll be. I don't want to try it for a couple of months because I figure they'll, dragoon me in there and I'll be paying forever. I'll be like those guys with the timeshares you hear about the radio. How do you get rid of this timeshare? Because you can get into it with a click, but you can't get out of it with a click. You have to go chat with somebody. You have to go figure out 10 different things you have to hit. You have to follow something. They make it as difficult as they can. But the law has been, regulations have been, that they don't have to make it easy for you. And there's what they call the negative option mark, which means that if you don't affirmatively say, I want out, they can deem that you want to keep in and you want to keep getting billed. And so without forcing people, forcing companies to have that easy click to cancel, they don't do it. Now, they obviously have done market studies to see the David Katz's that you get to try your product, that would try your product if he knew that it wasn't going to be a huge hassle to get out, are not as lucrative as the people that don't want to be in that you keep in. And these are the cable services. These are insurance contracts. This is big big business. And the case is absolutely fascinating. So the FTC under Biden has 3 Democratic members and 2 Republican members. That's how these independent agencies roll, and their decisions have been respected, and people have played by the rules. And so these 2 Republicans under Biden, the 2 out of the 5, did everything to help big business delay this rule. They filed dissenting opinions, they held it up. And there's all these rule-making procedures, Mark, which sound boring, but this is how things actually get done. When they do the studies that they have to do to figure out the economic impact, they say that, wow, big business could lose over $100 million. They ought to lose over $100 million. These are people who don't want their products. These are people who are being forced to pay for something they no longer want. Anyway, they decided it's going to be over $100 million, Mark. And then a new rule kicks in. You have to do some other kind of a study once it's a $100 million impact case. And allegedly, they didn't do that. So all the big business screamed and yelled that they had to do another study. And they said, no, enough is enough. The timing is fantastic, Mark, because it was November. Trump had just won the election. It was clear that he was going to decimate the FTC, that he was going to probably change it to where it wouldn't be 3-2 Democrats anymore. And if they studied it any longer, once Trump got in office, it would be studied to death and the rule would never be propounded. So they propounded their rule that there was click to cancel. Big business immediately took it to the courts. They took it to a whole bunch of different circuits, Mark, and somebody decides which circuit gets it. How that got done, I don't know in this case. I'm not saying anyone was corrupt. It went to the 8th Circuit. As soon as I saw that it was a 3-0 decision throwing out the click to cancel rule, I said, those are 3 Republicans. These issues have become so, you can guess by the politics. If they're Democratic appointed judges, they're doing something for the consumer. And I hate to say it, anyone can refute me if they want to try to refute me. If you see that it's Republican picked judges, it's almost always for business. So I looked to see who were the 3 appellate judges that threw out this rule, 2 appointed by Trump, 1 appointed by Bush. Okay. And the one who was appointed by Trump, even Senator Flake, a Republican, voted against this Trump judge. And guess who Pence had to push him? Pence, before Trump wanted to hang him, Trump broke the tie, put this Trump judge on the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, and 3-0, they just threw out this rule. Welcome to the courts.
The FTC, Federal Trade Commission, trying to modernize consumer protections, and the commission gets 70 consumer complaints a day, up from 42 back in 2021. And
well, people are too frustrated to write in, Mark. You know how many people really would complain if they
sure.
If it was, because this is what they do. They keep you in there when you don't want to be in there. You figure you can't get out. And I subscribe to fewer things, but as I say, the market, Mark, has obviously told them that you can keep more people in there who don't want your product anymore by making it really hard to get out than they would if they were transparent and easy and they made it. I mean, if it's good enough to get in, why shouldn't the click or 2 be good enough to get out? But
sure.
Obviously they don't want that. They want you there. They want you in there, and the law now allows them to keep you in there and just keep draining money out of you for a product or service that you no longer want. This is why Democrats should run to help the consumer. If Democrats would run on consumer issues and the economy, it's so popular. It's what working person, what normal person in America, what person who's not a multimillionaire invested in one of these companies wouldn't be on the side of the click to cancel rule.
Ron DeSantis in Florida, the Republican governor there, signing into law a law that makes it a crime to enter Florida after having come into the United States illegally, and then re-entering the state after having been deported. He signed this law, and then there was a court action, the Supreme Court, declining to take up a request from Florida to block this lower court's decision that bars the state from enforcing parts of that new immigration law. So the U.S. District Judge, I guess, Kathleen Williams down there, temporarily blocking enforcement of the law. That was in April. And last month, she found Florida Attorney General James Uthmeyer in civil contempt over what she said was an effort to defy her order. I guess they're looking at Florida as kind of the test case for the way they're kind of blowing past court decisions. But I'm wondering what can be done just from a legal standpoint, David Katz, along the lines of what DeSantis is trying to do. He's saying, if you're coming into this country illegally, you cannot come into my state, Florida, and that could be repeated in Texas, in New Mexico, Arizona, and California.
Well, DeSantis wanted to be president, and then he could do all the crazy things with immigration enforcement that Trump is doing. But he didn't end up being president. As Trump said, why have the apprentice when you can have the master? And he ran this vitriolic, emotional, personal campaign against DeSantis, which seemed like Trump's whole point was that he was taller than DeSantis. So the MAGA base wanted the tall master and not the short apprentice. And the rest is history. Well, guess what? As governor of a state, you don't get to set immigration policy. And that's why the U.S. Supreme Court just slapped this one down. And they've been very good on that, the U.S. Supreme Court, even the majority, not letting states set immigration policy. It's left in the Constitution to the federal government. That's a major federal power. And the idea is that you cannot have inconsistent immigration standards where Alabama does one thing and then you go into Tennessee. It's sort of like, Europe was in the old days, almost before they had the common market, that every time you go into a new place, you have new immigration standards. So they slapped that down, and it looks like that will go nowhere, and it probably will not go anywhere in the other states. So whatever the federal government decides to do on immigration, and we see the wide swings between Biden and now Trump, it makes a huge difference who you vote for president, but it doesn't make much difference who you vote for governor in terms of setting immigration policy in a particular state.
Just as an aside, quickly, it seems to me that the flow legally and legislatively and from the executive is clearly toward a kind of federal centricity to everything that really was, I think, not the way the country quacked for a long time, meaning the balance against federal power, central power in Washington, that then was generated from Washington to the rest of the country, that was always balanced by statehood and states' rights in one way or another. It seems that now, in this moment that we're living, the evolution of this country, the centralized federal government is getting tremendous power to overwhelm the states. In immigration, we've seen it, but I think in other ways as well. You, as an attorney who studies this stuff, is that a fair appraisal of where we're going?
Well, I think it's more the historian in us. And, we had states' rights was another way of saying slavery for a while. And then states' rights was another way of saying Jim Crow.
Segregation.
For a while.
Right.
And so federalism became sort of a dirty word among liberals and progressives because it meant Jim Crow in the South. And when you imposed federal law, like, for instance, this invasion of the Marines and the National Guard, this totally unwarranted, unnecessary invasion that we've just suffered. This is the first time that a president has sent troops into a state over the objections of the state's governor since LBJ did it in, I think, Alabama in the 60s. So, that's certainly, it's all, federalism is all tarnished by that. And there are some important reasons for federalism. You let some of these states do what they want with Medicaid, and they don't pay people anything. I mean, you look at some state like Mississippi, Mark, the standard of living and the failure to pay under Medicaid. Florida is another one. I mean, you can basically die down there. There's so little safety net. And so it's very tempting to say we want to have, not states' rights, not really respect federalism, if you mean by respect federalism, that states get to do pretty much whatever they want, but there's some floor. They can't go below, some floor. It's very tempting. But like I said, I've really had it. I think the whole West Coast has just had it with the way that, our federalism's not being respected and how Trump is just trying to really commandeer our agencies and to take over. And I mean, the dramatic thing, and people who don't live here haven't seen on their local TVs, maybe it's been all over the country, is the Bearcats and armored vehicles and mounted police who went into MacArthur Park, very Hispanic area, and all in LA, and did this huge show of force. And you think to yourself, this is like countries that have coups. This is not, how is he sending these federal troops here to do nothing except to say, to be dominant. It's like, the dominant monkey has arrived, and boom, 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 bear cats,
It's the
horseback.
farcical theater that is so much of this, but it's backed up by a tremendous flex that's sweeping up Latinos in neighborhoods around Los Angeles, and as we've mentioned, now going to agricultural communities and getting people, workers in the fields. It clearly was theater, the incident to which you've referred in MacArthur
Right.
Park, but it is also part of the supercharging of ICE with all that money that's in this bill that was just passed, and they're going to follow it up with stuff that's more than theater. But let me just get back to what I was talking about for a second. You're right. They're now toxic brands, federalism and state rights. Those labels, while rightly applied, do have toxicity around their brands for the reason that you pointed out, Jim Crow, et cetera, with states' rights. But the process, what we're seeing, you take those labels out, the federal government putting its thumb down in California. I'm glad that you mentioned the MacArthur Park case, because it feels like California is almost the test case for this administration. But as I was saying before, I think you're going to see more federal troops in more states, in more cities, as a prominent part of Trumpian policy in the months and years ahead.
Well, a lot of it is just the whole braggadocio of Trump. He just said the other day, well, they're going to take over DC and they're going to run it so good.
Yeah, so good.
I think it's well.
He speaks
I think
so
in
good.
Third grade.
Yeah.
I think in third grade you learned that it's well in that situation.
Well, he even said to the Liberian president, "You speak English so good." It was like, wow.
It's truly remarkable.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
And meanwhile, Biden was the one who had mental problems.
Yeah,
supposedly, he had speech issues. Anyway, he can't take over Washington D.C. Because there's a local rule act. It was passed by Congress. Congress allowed local rule for D.C. Again, he'd have to pass a bill so that he could take over D.C. in any meaningful way.
Well, Congress, the home rule that you're talking about, because I know it's not because I grew up in Washington, D.C., right. I think, but you can correct me, it provides for them to run their own city, but Congress could intercede at any time if they want.
But again, they don't have intercession. That's one that would have to get past the filibuster. They don't have 60 votes in the Senate. So the reality is home rule, which gives home rule to DC on most issues, is not about to change. So yes, could he do some atrocity like Lafayette Park the first time? Could he, beat a bunch of demonstrators over the head? And yes, would his military officials go along with it, with his new Department of Defense? Of course, they would go along with it. He could walk with his Bible again, but he couldn't take over D.C. And when he talks about New York, he doesn't like who the mayor may be, so he's going to take over New York City. That's all ridiculous. None of that's going to happen. He was able to do, I think, more of that in L.A. And California, just because people who aren't out here just really can't believe how much this state and city are repelled by him. I don't think there's any chance of a Republican winning statewide office in California for at least 50 years. New York's different. They have chances of winning different things in New York. So politically, I don't think that he would put on this kind of show. I don't think we're going to have the Marines marching through Times Square.
But finish your thought. You said the reason he came to California was what?
I think that one of the reasons he came to California was he felt he had nothing to lose, that we could be a symbol for the rest of the country, and that he was not going to lose votes in Missouri or any place else. There's this congressman right now from the Central Valley. He has a Latino name. He's a Republican. He voted for the big, ugly bill. 2/3 of his constituents are on Medi-Cal. I'm going to say that again. The Medicaid program called Medi-Cal in California, 2/3 of his constituents are on it and are going to be hurt. This guy just slit his own political throat. And apparently, he's going to get, 2 years. He'll be out as a congressman. Trump will make him ambassador to God only knows where. That's how that one's going to roll. He obviously voted against the interests of his constituents. But my point is that New York City is a different bag. And can I say one thing about the mayor there? They have this new thing about the mayor. that they don't like the mayoral candidate. And, I like him, Mark, because he went to my high school, Bronx High School of
You're
Science.
talking about the socialist candidate?
As my brother's
Mandami, as you were talking about, right?
The Muslim Marxist mayor. Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? The Muslim Marxist mayor. He's not a Marxist. He wants to freeze the rent. That's, Mayor Adams, who's in there now.
Well, he's a self-described socialist.
That's not, doesn't make him a Marxist.
No, I agree. But I just wanted to let let's be fair to.
In terms of their policy differences on running the city,
of course,
Mayor Adams lets rent stabilized rents go up 3% a year. He wants to freeze the rent to 0%. It's not exactly like, you look at how Trump has changed policies. So if you re-elect the incumbent mayor, 3% rent raise. This guy wants to freeze the rent, 0% rent raise. It's not exactly, the Bolshevik Revolution.
Well, he wants free transportation, public transport in New York City, and he wants to raise taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers. But
almost all the buses are free, and people don't pay for the bus. It's no big deal.
Yeah, anyway, that continues to be a point of controversy, and Trump has said if he was to win, he would that Trump would take over the city. Hey, will you let me get to this this one thing that involved the dogs, which I really
then I do have to run.
Yeah,
Mark, me to look early. Can you talk about the dogs without me?
I need to run also, David Katz. Okay, do you want? Should we both run? I don't pull. I got to run on me without. I'm somebody also, David Katz.
Do you know who I am?
Yes,
I'm kind of a big deal.
I have big deal
Mark,
things.
You're a huge big deal, and I always ask people to turn on your station, and they always thank me. That's the truth.
Oh, that's really cool.
You won a wonderful program. You just talked about the 8th Circuit decision, about click to that click thing. I don't think there was a better discussion of that. I'm true, I was part of it. But I don't think there was a better discussion of that on the BBC or on NPR or on anywhere, Mark. And you're so interested in the environment and these environmental rulings and how these cases really impact the environment and how we're going the wrong way on global warming and all the other things that matter to people who care about the environment and the planet that we're living in. So I think you do a wonderful show, but I gotta leave, Mark.
We love you. David Katz, thank you. I'm glad that morphed into a compliment. That was a great moment.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.